Have you ever wondered why something so seemingly simple can feel so profoundly powerful? Why a single moment, a single touch, or a single choice of angle can turn ordinary desire into something unforgettable? It's easy to think it's just about the body, about curves and skin and motion. But the truth runs deeper, far beyond what eyes can see or hands can touch. Deep down, it's about the mind, the heart, and that hidden part of us all that longs not just for pleasure, but for connection, for surrender, and for the sweet thrill of letting go. Imagine this, a moment suspended in time where everything else disappears. No distractions, no masks, no need to pretend. Just raw, honest desire shared without words. It's in this space, this fragile, beautiful space, that women often discover something far richer than physical sensation alone. It's here they feel truly free, free to let go of doubt, free to silence the voices of self-judgment, and free to simply feel. Because sometimes the sweetest pleasure isn't about seeing each other face to face. It's about turning away and still feeling closer than ever. Why does this matter? Because at its core, intimacy isn't just about what you do, it's about what it means. When a woman turns her back, she's not closing off. She's opening a door to something deeper, a quiet invitation whispered through trust. It takes courage to let someone in that deeply, to be touched not just on the surface, but in the places we guard most carefully. And when she chooses to open that door, it isn't about the act itself, but about what the act symbolizes, the courage to be seen, even when she isn't looking back. There's something primal and yet tender about it, something that bypasses logic and speaks straight to the soul. In that moment, she isn't thinking about flaws or insecurities. She isn't worried about the way she looks, the way she sounds, or the world beyond the room. Her body remembers what her mind often forgets. That true pleasure is found in surrender, not control. That true sweetness comes when you stop trying to perfect the moment and simply live inside it. For so many women, that shift changes everything. It's a soft rebellion against the pressure to always perform, to always watch, to always measure up. When she turns away, she steps out of the spotlight of her own mind. And what's left is something raw and honest, a kind of vulnerability that's both terrifying and exhilarating. She isn't watching herself, she's just feeling. Every breath, every movement, every heartbeat becomes clearer, louder, and more real. This is why it feels so sweet, because it isn't just about bodies connecting. It's about walls coming down, about trust rising higher than fear, and about discovering that real desire isn't found in perfection, but in presence. In that space, pleasure isn't something to chase. It's something that finds you, gently at first, then all at once. There's a hidden gift here, too, one that many overlook. It's the way turning away can actually draw two people closer, because when vision fades, the other senses awaken. Touch becomes electric. Sounds become intimate whispers in the dark. The mind stops racing ahead and begins to linger, to truly savor what's unfolding. And in that stillness, something remarkable happens. Connection deepens, not because you see each other, but because you trust each other enough not to need to. And maybe, at the heart of it all, this is what every woman really longs for. Not just to be desired, but to be trusted to let go. To know she can turn her back and still be held, still be cherished, still be safe. Because the sweetest moments in life often aren't the ones we plan or control. They're the ones we allow. The ones where we drop the mask, quiet the doubts, and simply surrender to what's real. This isn't just about physical pleasure. It's about emotional freedom, about stepping outside the narrow box of how things should look or feel, and discovering how they can feel when you let them happen naturally. It's about rewriting the story from how do I look to how deeply can I feel? And this is why you'll want to stay until the end, because behind this simple question lies something far more powerful than you might expect, a truth about desire, trust, and the quiet strength it takes to open up completely. A truth that doesn't just change how a moment feels, but changes how you see intimacy forever. Because when you finally understand why it feels so sweet, you'll see that it was never just about the position, the moment, or even the pleasure itself. It's about what it unlocks inside us, the freedom to trust, the courage to surrender, and the power to feel alive in ways we often forget are possible. And once you see that, you'll realize the real sweetness was never just in the act. It was in the choice to let yourself be fully, unapologetically human. But what truly makes this moment unforgettable isn't just the act of turning away. It's the raw courage it takes to reveal something deeper than the body, the courage to show vulnerability. And it's in that vulnerability where real sweetness blooms. Because when a woman turns her back, she's not just shifting her body, she's lowering her guard, offering trust in its purest form. Trust that says, I believe you'll hold me even when I'm not watching. I believe you'll see me even when I'm not looking. And that silent message carries a weight far greater than words could ever hold. Vulnerability is never weakness. It is strength in its rarest form. In a world that teaches women to stay guarded, to measure every move and watch every word, choosing to surrender becomes a radical act. And what makes it so powerful is that it's not forced, it's freely given. It's the difference between being taken and choosing to be taken. That choice changes everything. It transforms what could be just physical into something deeply emotional, an unspoken promise that says, here I am completely. Do not break what I've chosen to share. For her, it isn't about giving up power. It's about giving trust. And trust is the deepest kind of intimacy there is. It's the silent bond that says, I see you, and I let you see me too. And in that letting go, pleasure stops being something chased and starts being something discovered. Because only when we let go of fear do we truly allow ourselves to feel. That's why these moments stay in the memory long after the night ends. Because the sweetest part isn't the sensation alone, it's knowing she dared to be open, that she risked being truly seen even when turned away. It's the vulnerability that makes the pleasure real, raw, and unforgettable. And once she feels that kind of freedom, it's impossible to settle for anything less. Psychology tells us that vulnerability triggers deep emotional bonding. It creates connection beyond words, beyond touch, beyond logic. It speaks to the primal part of the human heart that craves acceptance without condition. And in the moment when she turns away, she's silently asking, will you accept all of me, even the parts I can't see? When that answer is yes, the sweetness becomes something no position, no technique, no trick could ever replace. Yet so many people miss this. They focus only on the surface, on movement, on angle, on what looks good. But the real magic lives underneath. It's not in what the eyes see, but in what the soul feels. That's why for many women, the sweetest moments aren't the ones that look perfect from the outside, but the ones that feel perfect from the inside, where doubt is replaced by trust and fear dissolves into freedom. This isn't just about intimacy. It's about life itself. Because everything we truly desire, love, connection, belonging, starts the same way, by daring to be vulnerable, by dropping the armor we've carried for so long and letting someone see what's real. It's terrifying. And yet it's the only way to feel fully alive. Think about how often we hide, even outside the bedroom. We hide behind carefully crafted words, behind screens and filters, behind busyness and pride. We fear that if someone saw us as we really are, they'd turn away. But the truth is, it's the exact opposite. Real connection doesn't happen when we look perfect. It happens when we look human. When we say, this is me, flawed, imperfect, and real, and someone says, that's exactly what I wanted to see. That is the reward of vulnerability. Not just pleasure, but peace. Not just connection, but belonging. It's the quiet knowing that we don't have to be perfect to be loved deeply. And when a woman dares to give that gift, when she dares to turn her back and still trust to be held, she steps into a power greater than any performance could ever create. And for the person holding her, it's a silent responsibility too. A chance to show her that trust wasn't misplaced, to hold not just her body, but her courage, to answer her vulnerability with gentleness, respect, and presence. Because that's what keeps the sweetness alive, the knowing that trust will be honored, not broken. In the end, that's why this moment matters so deeply. It's not just about what's happening physically. It's about what it means emotionally. It's a dance between strength and softness, between letting go and being held. And it teaches us something profound about life, that the sweetest experiences come not from trying harder, but from opening wider, from risking the heart again and again, even when it feels frightening. Because real intimacy, the kind that stays, the kind that heals, the kind that changes us, is always built on the same brave act, the choice to be vulnerable. And when that choice is met with love, it becomes something unbreakable, something unforgettable, something that feels, in every sense of the word, so very sweet. But what makes this moment even more powerful is how it transforms control itself into something deeper, something that transcends the physical and speaks straight to the spirit. Because when she turns away, she gives up the illusion of control, and what she gains instead is something far richer, heightened awareness, raw presence, and an intensity that cannot be faked. It's as if, in choosing to surrender, she claims an unexpected kind of power. The power to feel every touch, every breath, every heartbeat, without the need to anticipate what comes next. This shift is more than physical. It's psychological. When she can't see what's happening, her mind stops racing ahead to guess or plan. The senses sharpen. Every small movement becomes amplified. Every gentle pause becomes suspense. And this suspense, this beautiful unpredictability, awakens something ancient within us all, because our brains are wired to crave the unknown, to respond to surprise with a rush of dopamine that makes the experience feel richer, deeper, unforgettable. In that moment, pleasure stops being predictable. It becomes discovery. Each touch feels new. Each sound feels closer. Each breath shared feels more intimate than words could ever describe. And it's this unpredictability that makes desire burn brighter.
Because true passion isn't built on routine.
It's built on curiosity, on mystery, on the space between what we know and what we're about to find. For so many women, this is the sweetness they never knew they were missing. The sweetness of being able to step out of the mind's constant chatter and into the raw honesty of the body. Of realizing that pleasure isn't something to control, but something to experience moment by moment without expectation. And it's in this surrender to the unknown that the deepest kind of intimacy is born, the kind that lingers long after the night ends. There's a hidden truth here, one that changes how we see connection itself. Control can create safety, but it rarely creates magic. Magic lives in the space where certainty fades and trust takes over, where both people step into the unknown together. And that unknown becomes the place where hearts speak louder than words, where silence becomes music, and where every touch carries the weight of something unspoken yet deeply understood.
It takes courage to step into that space.
Courage to let go of the need to know what comes next. Courage to trust another person so deeply that even when you can't see them, you still feel held. And it's this courage that transforms the moment into something unforgettable. Because real intimacy isn't found in what is seen, but in what is felt when the eyes close and the heart opens. And in truth, the sweetest moments in life often come when we stop trying to hold on so tightly, when we stop chasing control and start embracing vulnerability, when we allow ourselves to be surprised, to be moved, to be changed by the unexpected. Because what the mind can predict, it quickly forgets. But what the heart discovers in a moment of surrender becomes a memory that stays, a story that shapes us long after the moment itself has passed. This isn't just about what happens between two people, it's a lesson about life itself. So often we cling to control because we're afraid of falling, afraid of being hurt, afraid of the unknown. But what if it's in the unknown that the deepest beauty lives? What if it's in surrender that we find not weakness, but strength beyond measure? What if the very thing we fear, letting go, is the key to everything we truly desire? Because when a woman chooses to surrender, she isn't giving up who she is. She's discovering who she can become when she stops trying to direct every moment and simply allows herself to feel. And in doing so, she invites her partner into the same space. A space where desire isn't something performed, but something shared, raw, and real. This is why unpredictability feels so sweet. Not because it's wild or reckless, but because it's honest. It strips away the masks, the roles, the pressure to get it right. What's left is something far more precious. The truth of two souls meeting in a moment of pure presence. And in that meeting, there is no need to impress, no need to prove, no need to plan. There is only the electric now. And perhaps that's the real reason it feels so unforgettable. Because in letting go of control, she finds something greater than control, connection. Connection that is alive, breathing, changing with every heartbeat. Connection that doesn't rely on what can be seen, but on what can be felt when nothing else matters. And that, more than anything else, is what turns a simple act into something transcendent. It reminds us that true pleasure isn't something to be forced or chased. It's something to be allowed, discovered, and honored. It's the gift of being fully alive in the moment without fear, without doubt, and finding that what awaits us in the unknown is often sweeter than anything we could have planned. Because real intimacy, real sweetness, real magic lives not in certainty, but in surrender. And it's in that surrender that we finally remember what it means to truly feel. And what makes it even more profound is that surrender is never just physical. It's an invitation to quiet the noise of self-judgment, to silence the relentless voice that asks, am I enough? In those moments, a woman discovers something she often forgets in the rush of daily life, that she doesn't have to prove, to pose, to perform. She only has to be. And that raw, unfiltered presence becomes the true source of sweetness, because it's where the mind finally rests and the heart takes over. So often we are taught to hold ourselves together, to stay composed, to hide anything that might look messy or imperfect. But real connection doesn't live in perfection. It lives in the trembling breath, in the racing heartbeat, in the moments when control slips away and what's left is pure feeling. When a woman turns her back and allows someone to enter not just her body, but her hidden places of trust, she's reminding herself and her partner of a truth. Most people spend a lifetime forgetting we are most beautiful when we are most real. This honesty becomes its own kind of power, because it liberates both people from the need to keep up appearances. Suddenly, intimacy isn't a performance to be watched or judged. It's an experience to be lived. And in that experience, every movement matters less than the meaning behind it. The sweetness isn't measured by how it looks, but by how deeply it's felt. It's the quiet magic of knowing that in this moment, nothing else matters but the shared pulse of desire and trust. At its core, this sweetness is about acceptance, the acceptance of imperfections, of fears, of scars, both seen and unseen. And in giving that acceptance to another, something inside her softens. Walls built over years begin to crumble. Doubts that whisper, "What if I'm not enough?" fade beneath the steady heartbeat of someone who chooses to stay, to hold, to cherish. That moment becomes proof that she doesn't have to watch herself to be worthy of love. She can simply feel, and that is enough. And here lies the deeper truth. Sweetness is not born from grand gestures, but from presence. It's not about what you do. It's about how fully you are there. When she surrenders, she isn't asking for perfection. She's asking for presence. For someone to meet her in the raw, unscripted now. To listen not with ears alone, but with hands, breath, and the quiet language of touch that says, "I see you," even when you can't see yourself. This is what makes these moments echo in memory long after the physical sensations have faded. It's not the act itself that stays. It's the feeling of being truly seen and accepted without condition. The realization that she can let go and still be held. And that memory becomes an anchor, a reminder that trust is possible, that surrender doesn't always lead to hurt. Sometimes it leads to the sweetest connection she has ever known. And for the one who holds her, there is a silent responsibility too. To understand that what feels sweet is not just the curve of her body, but the courage of her trust. To honor that trust, to protect it, to hold it gently like something sacred. Because it is sacred. It is proof of something far rarer than physical desire, emotional safety. And when two people step into that space together, the ordinary becomes extraordinary. In those moments, the mind stops asking, "How do I look?" and starts asking, "How do I feel?" And when she answers that question honestly, something shifts. Pleasure stops being about reaching a peak and becomes about exploring every rise and fall along the way. The journey becomes the destination, and that journey, rich with vulnerability and trust, becomes far sweeter than any perfect performance ever could. What's most powerful is that this lesson doesn't stay confined to the bedroom. It ripples out into life itself. Because the same courage it takes to turn away and trust is the courage it takes to show your true self in the world. To risk rejection, to speak your truth, to stop living behind the mask. And each time a woman dares to surrender, to let herself be seen in her rawest, most human form, she remembers that she is more than enough, not because she is flawless, but because she is real. And this is where sweetness becomes transformation. It shows her that the deepest pleasure comes not from controlling how she is perceived, but from living fully in how she feels. It teaches her to measure life not by how perfect it looks from the outside, but by how alive it feels on the inside. And once she tastes that kind of sweetness, she'll crave it not just in intimacy, but in every part of her life. Because when you learn to let go of control, you find something better, freedom. Freedom to feel without apology, to trust without fear, to love without limits. And in that freedom, you discover what it truly means to be alive, not as a carefully crafted image, but as a soul willing to be seen, to be touched, and to belong. In the end, the sweetest moments are never those we plan. They are the ones we allow, the moments when control falls away, and what remains is something raw, something real, something deeply human. And in that human honesty, we find the taste of something far richer than pleasure alone, the taste of true connection, the kind that lingers in the heart long after the moment itself has passed. There's something deeply human in the quiet courage it takes to drop the mask, to stop asking, "Am I doing this right?" and instead ask, "Am I feeling this fully?" Because when she turns away, it isn't just an act of trust in someone else, it's an act of trust in herself. It's her way of saying, "I am enough, even when I'm unseen." And that shift is where everything changes. Suddenly, it isn't about performance or perfection. It's about presence, about being so deeply inside the moment that the rest of the world fades, and what's left is only heartbeat, breath, and touch. This is where the sweetness grows roots so deep it can't be shaken. It's not in the grand gestures, but in the quiet acceptance of imperfection, in the choice to keep breathing through doubt, in the realization that her worth isn't proven by what she does, but by who she is when she allows herself to simply be. And once she tastes that, it becomes a truth too powerful to ignore. Real pleasure doesn't come from chasing what's next. It comes from sinking into what's now. Psychology tells us our deepest longing isn't for excitement alone, but for acceptance, for a space where we're not just desired for what we show, but cherished for what we hide. And when she turns her back and dares to trust, she steps into that space, a space where she can stop controlling every breath, every thought, every move, and instead let herself be carried by the moment, where the question is no longer, do I look right, but do I feel alive? And aliveness is the real reward, because life teaches us to edit ourselves, to shrink our truths to fit what others want to see, but in that raw moment, editing falls away. She feels not as an idea of who she should be, but as the truth of who she is, vulnerable, strong, imperfect, real. And that realness is where connection takes root. The sweetness isn't just in being desired, but in being desired without having to pretend. It's an unspoken promise. I choose to trust you, even when I can't see you. And that choice doesn't just change how she feels. It changes what the moment means. It becomes more than physical pleasure. It becomes a shared language of trust, a memory etched deeper than skin. It's why these moments last long after the body quiets. Because it's not just the body that was touched, it's the heart that was held. And holding someone's heart is the highest form of intimacy. It's knowing that even in the dark, even unseen, she's safe. That she doesn't have to guard every move, every sound, that she can let go, and in letting go, discover more of herself than she ever could in control, because it's only when we stop directing every detail that we truly get to feel the unexpected. And it's in the unexpected that the most profound sweetness waits. So often the world tells women to stay on guard, to watch, to plan, to stay 2 steps ahead. But the irony is that real pleasure doesn't live in strategy. It lives in surrender, and surrender is not weakness. It is the strongest act of all. It says, I trust myself enough to let go. I trust you enough to hold me. And in that trust, something greater than desire awakens. A knowing that she can be fully herself, and that this fullness is more than enough. This isn't just about what happens in a single moment. It becomes a lesson carried into every part of life. That real love, the kind that heals, the kind that stays, isn't built by trying to look perfect. It's built by showing what's real, by risking rejection and finding acceptance instead. And the more she dares to trust this truth, the freer she becomes. Not just in intimacy, but in every choice, every breath. Because the greatest sweetness doesn't come from being perfectly seen, it comes from knowing that even unseen, she is still wanted, still cherished, still safe. It's a freedom that reshapes everything. A freedom that whispers, you don't have to hold it all together to be loved. You can let go, and you'll still be held. And once she believes that, the fear of surrender begins to fade. What remains is not fear, but possibility. Possibility that each moment can bring something new, something real. That intimacy can be as simple as breathing together in the dark. That love isn't built on performance, but on presence. And in that presence, the ordinary becomes extraordinary, because it's not about what they see. It's about what they feel and what they create together in the unseen. In the end, this is why it feels so sweet, because it's honest. It's the rawest truth of being human, wanting to be known, even when hidden, wanting to be loved, not for how perfectly we perform, but for how bravely we reveal ourselves. And in that revelation, there is no need to chase more, do more, or prove more. There's only the moment and the quiet, powerful truth that being real is what makes us unforgettable. And that is the sweetness that lingers. long after the touch has ended, long after the night has passed. What stays is the memory of trust given and trust honored, the proof that the deepest pleasure isn't in being watched, but in being felt, not in control, but in surrender. And in that surrender, she finds not just desire, but freedom, not just sweetness, but something unbreakable, the quiet certainty that being her true, unguarded self is not just enough. It is everything. And what makes this truth so liberating is that it doesn't ask her to be anything more than she already is. It doesn't demand that she becomes flawless or fearless. It invites her to see that the cracks she hides are not weaknesses, but places where the sweetest light gets in. The sweetness comes from understanding that surrender is not a step backward. It's a return to herself, a return to a place where she doesn't have to negotiate her worth or filter her desires, where the masks fall away and what remains is the purest, most honest part of who she is, because the heart doesn't beat faster for perfection, it beats faster for authenticity, for that electric moment when she lets go of trying to impress and simply allows herself to feel. And when she does, something inside softens. The tension that kept her guarded dissolves. What rises in its place is a deeper intimacy that words can't capture, an intimacy that exists not because of what's visible, but because of what's shared in the unseen. And this is what many miss when they see only the surface. They see an act, but they don't see the silent courage behind it. They don't see the years it might have taken her to trust, to open, to stop fighting the instinct to stay hidden. They don't see the quiet decision that says, I will risk being vulnerable because I know real connection is worth it. And that decision is what transforms the moment from something physical into something profoundly human. Because at its deepest level, surrender is not about giving something away. It's about claiming something greater, freedom. Freedom to exist without explanation, freedom to desire without apology, freedom to know that her worth isn't measured by how tightly she can hold on, but by how bravely she can let go. And once she discovers that, it becomes a kind of awakening, the realization that what makes her unforgettable isn't the image she projects, but the truth she reveals. The world teaches her to guard her softness, to hide her doubts, to be strong in ways that often mean being closed. But the sweetest strength is not found in the walls we build, but in the courage to open them, to say, here I am, unfiltered and unplanned. And in that openness, she finds something even stronger than control. Trust. Trust in herself that she can survive the vulnerability. Trust in her partner that the softness she reveals won't be met with judgment, but with acceptance. And that trust is what makes every breath feel deeper, every touch feel warmer, because the moment isn't weighed down by fear of what might go wrong. It's lifted by the hope of what might go right. And that hope is intoxicating. It whispers, there is more to feel than you have ever dared to feel. And so she lets herself go further, sink deeper, breathe slower. And the more she lets go, the more she finds. Not emptiness, but fullness. A fullness that comes from living every heartbeat instead of observing it from a distance. This is why the sweetness lingers long after. Because it's tied to something bigger than pleasure. It's tied to meaning. Meaning that she dared to trust, dared to surrender, dared to be more than what the world expected. Meaning that in a single moment she proved to herself that she can be raw and still be loved, imperfect and still be wanted, unseen and still be felt completely. And that proof becomes a kind of power that nothing can take away. What starts as an intimate moment becomes a reminder she carries everywhere, a reminder that she doesn't have to be on display to be desired, that she doesn't have to control every detail to feel worthy, that sometimes the deepest connection comes not when she performs, but when she simply allows. And that lesson doesn't stay behind closed doors. It walks with her into every part of life. Because once she has felt the strength of surrender, the freedom of trust, she begins to live differently. She speaks with more honesty, loves with more courage, and stops shrinking herself to fit into someone else's idea of enough. And every time fear whispers, what if you show too much? She remembers that sweetness isn't born from hiding, but from revealing, not from trying to be everything, but from daring to be exactly who she is. And in that daring, something extraordinary happens. The sweetness becomes self-sustaining. It no longer depends on someone else's gaze or approval. It becomes an inner knowing that even unseen, she shines. Even unheard, she matters. Even unguarded, she is strong. And that knowing changes everything, because it frees her to love not from fear, but from abundance. This is the secret often overlooked. that what feels sweet isn't just the act itself, but the liberation that comes with it. The liberation from self-doubt, from endless performance, from the belief that she must always do more to deserve love. And in that liberation, she finds not only pleasure, but peace. A peace that whispers, "You were never meant to be perfect. You were meant to be real." And so the sweetness isn't just in the moment of surrender, but in every moment that follows, in every choice to stay open when it would be easier to close, in every breath taken without fear of judgment, in every heartbeat that says, "This is me, and this is enough." And that, more than anything, is why it feels so deeply, achingly sweet, because it is a moment where love meets truth, and where truth finally feels safe to be seen. And when that truth finally feels safe to be seen, something profound awakens inside her, a quiet revolution of the heart. Because it's in those raw moments of surrender that she learns love doesn't ask her to erase her shadows. It asks her to bring them closer, to see them not as flaws to hide, but as proof that she has lived, loved, fallen, and risen again. The sweetness comes not from the perfection she chased for so long, but from the acceptance she chooses now. Acceptance that she is more than enough, even when every mask is gone. It is here, in the unseen space where judgment cannot follow, that she touches a deeper freedom than the world ever offered. A freedom born from finally believing that vulnerability is not weakness, that it is strength so real, so raw, it shakes her soul awake. And in that awakening, the walls she built to protect herself start to crumble, not with fear, but with relief. Because those walls kept pain out, yes, but they also kept joy out, kept love out, kept the very sweetness she longed for just beyond her reach. As those walls come down, she discovers something that changes everything. Surrender isn't the end of control. It's the beginning of connection. True connection, the kind that doesn't fade when the lights go out. The kind that doesn't depend on appearances or angles or carefully chosen words. The kind that is felt in the quiet between heartbeats, in the breath shared in the dark, in the pulse of trust that says, "I see you even when you cannot see me." And that is what makes it unforgettable. Because what she longs for, what we all long for, isn't simply to be touched, it's to be truly felt. To know that when she lets go, she doesn't disappear. Instead, she becomes more present, more real, more alive than ever before. The sweetness comes from realizing that being unseen doesn't mean being invisible. It means being free from the need to perform. Free from the endless loop of asking, "Am I enough?" Because in that moment, she isn't trying to prove herself. She is simply being herself, fully, fearlessly, beautifully. And that is where desire transforms into something deeper, into a reverence for what is shared in silence, into a gratitude so powerful it hums beneath the skin, into an understanding that love isn't something to be earned by perfection. It is something to be welcomed by presence. And once she feels that, she no longer needs to chase sweetness from the outside. She carries it within her, an unshakable knowing that her worth was never tied to what anyone else could see. Every time she dares to surrender again, the sweetness grows richer, not because the moment becomes more perfect, but because she becomes more honest, more willing to trust, more willing to let go of the stories she told herself about what love should look like, and instead discover what love truly feels like. And each time she lets go a little more, fear loosens its grip. Doubt loses its power. What remains is a steady, quiet certainty. She is loved not because she is flawless, but because she is real. And that is the most liberating truth of all, because the world outside may still judge, still demand perfection, still whisper that vulnerability is dangerous. But inside, in the unseen space of surrender, she finds a softness that is stronger than any armor, a tenderness that makes her brave enough to risk being hurt again. Because the sweetness of real connection, real acceptance, is worth far more than the safety of walls that keep her heart untouched. She begins to see that the most intimate moments are not measured by what can be watched, but by what can be felt, by the trust that makes her breathe deeper, by the openness that makes her heart beat faster, by the courage to say, "This is me, unguarded, imperfect, and true." And when that offering is met with acceptance, it leaves an imprint deeper than memory. It becomes a part of her, reshaping how she loves, how she lives, how she sees herself. And perhaps the greatest sweetness of all is not what she feels in a single moment, but what she carries forward. The unspoken knowledge that she is enough, even when unseen. That she is strongest when she dares to be soft. that surrender doesn't make her smaller, it makes her boundless. And in every part of her life, from whispered intimacy to silent self-reflection, she feels that quiet power rise again and again. Because she understands now that real love doesn't demand perfection, it invites honesty, and real pleasure doesn't live in the places she controls, but in the spaces where she lets go. And so each act of surrender becomes an act of freedom. Each breath taken without fear becomes an affirmation that her true self is worthy, beautiful, and deeply desired. In this knowing, she finds a sweetness no one can take from her. It's not tied to what is seen, but to what is felt. Not to what she does, but to who she dares to be. And it's in that daring, that courage to be raw and real, that she discovers the deepest, most lasting sweetness of all, the peace that comes from finally loving herself, completely, unconditionally, and without apology. And when she finally embraces that peace within, something remarkable shifts in how she walks through the world. It's as though the invisible weight she's carried for years quietly falls away, leaving her lighter, freer, more alive. Every breath feels fuller because it's no longer filtered through doubt. Every glance in the mirror becomes softer, no longer a search for flaws, but a recognition of depth. She realizes her worth isn't something she has to argue for, defend, or display. It is something she simply inhabits. And this quiet confidence radiates outward, transforming even the smallest moments into something meaningful. It's in the way she laughs without rehearsing the sound, the way she pauses to feel rather than rush to please, the way her presence speaks louder than any words ever could. This is not the loud confidence the world often praises, the kind built on applause and attention. It's the steady, rooted kind that remains even when no one is watching. It's the knowledge that real sweetness comes not from being everything to everyone, but from being utterly, unapologetically herself. And when doubt whispers in the dark, as it always will, she no longer tries to silence it with perfection. Instead, she answers it with truth. She remembers that vulnerability is not a weakness to be hidden, but a power to be honored. She remembers that the sweetest moments are born not when she performs, but when she simply feels. And she chooses to feel fully, even if it means risking heartbreak, rejection, or disappointment. Because the risk of feeling deeply is nothing compared to the emptiness of always holding back. Through this acceptance, she discovers a tenderness toward herself that was once unimaginable, a compassion that forgives the mistakes, embraces the scars, and understands that they are proof of her courage, not her failure. And in this tenderness, she learns the most liberating truth. She does not need to be perfect to be worthy of love. She does not need to always be strong to be admired. She does not need to hide her softness to be respected. In fact, it is her softness, her willingness to feel, to trust, to surrender, that makes her truly powerful. The sweetness becomes an anchor she can return to in moments of doubt. It reminds her that connection is never built on what she pretends to be, but on what she dares to reveal. It whispers that love isn't earned through flawless performances, but discovered in raw honesty. And this realization is not just healing. It is transformative, because it frees her to love without calculation, to desire without apology, and to live without the constant burden of proving herself. And as this truth sinks deeper into her heart, it begins to ripple outward into every relationship, every choice, every breath. She starts to show up differently, not chasing validation, but radiating authenticity. People around her feel it too, even if they can't name it. They sense the calm confidence in her eyes, the warmth in her presence, the openness in her silence. And it draws them in, not because she tries to impress, but because she dares to be real. This is the paradox she finally understands. The more she surrenders the need to control how others see her, the more deeply she is truly seen. The more she stops fighting to be perfect, the more perfectly she fits into the moments that matter. And the more she stops chasing sweetness outside herself, the more she finds it blooming within, steady, quiet, and lasting. And what makes this so powerful is that it isn't a lesson she learns once and forgets. It is something she lives, breathes, and chooses again and again. Each time doubt creeps in, she remembers that her value was never meant to be conditional. Each time fear tells her to hold back, she answers with the quiet bravery to keep her heart open. And each time she wonders if she's too much or not enough, she returns to that simple, unshakable truth. She is exactly as she is meant to be. It is here, in this choice to stay open, that she discovers the deepest sweetness of all. It is not the sweetness that fades when the lights turn on or that depends on someone else's gaze. It is the sweetness that remains in the quiet of her own soul, the sweetness of knowing she belongs to herself, that her worth is not defined by how she is seen, but by how she feels, that her love is not a performance to perfect, but a gift to give. And this sweetness changes everything. It softens the way she speaks to herself, turning criticism into kindness. It deepens the way she loves, replacing fear with trust. It makes her presence a refuge, not just for others, but for herself. And in living this way, she doesn't just taste sweetness, she becomes it. A living, breathing reminder that the greatest power lies not in hiding our softness, but in revealing it. And in that revelation, she finds what she had been seeking all along, not perfection, but peace, not applause, but authenticity, not fleeting pleasure, but an enduring, undeniable sweetness that starts and ends within. And as that sweetness becomes part of who she is, something else awakens, a quiet but unstoppable desire to live her entire life with the same fearless honesty. No longer confined to moments of intimacy or stolen glimpses in the mirror, this courage seeps into her mornings, her words, her choices. She starts to speak from her heart, even when her voice trembles. She chooses paths that scare her not because they guarantee success, but because they promise truth. She learns to say no without guilt, to say yes without hesitation, and to say I don't know without shame. Every decision becomes a declaration. I trust myself enough to show up as I am. She stops shrinking to fit places that were never built for her truth. She no longer feels the need to compete with the edited versions of others, because she knows her raw reality holds more power than any curated illusion. And people feel this shift in her presence, the kind of presence that doesn't demand attention, but effortlessly draws it in. A presence built on the quiet certainty that she belongs, not because she meets someone else's standard, but because she finally honors her own. Even the way she loves transforms. Love becomes less about needing to be chosen and more about choosing courage again and again. The courage to open her heart fully, knowing it might break. The courage to love deeply, even without guarantees. The courage to remain soft in a world that often rewards hardness. And it's in this softness, this willingness to be hurt, to heal, to hope again, that love finds its truest strength. Because it isn't built on fear of loss, but on gratitude for the chance to feel at all. She understands now that sweetness isn't something life hands out freely. It's something we create by how bravely we show up. And the more she shows up with her whole heart, the richer life becomes. Even the ordinary moments, a morning coffee, a silent walk, a shared smile, shimmer with meaning because she's no longer half present. She's no longer waiting for permission to feel joy or for the perfect moment to start living fully. She realizes the perfect moment is always now. This is the freedom she once thought belonged only to other people. The freedom to exist without apology, to desire without shame, to love without armor. And it was never found in what others could see, but in what she dared to reveal to herself. The invisible work of shedding old stories, facing hidden fears, and choosing softness over self-protection. This work isn't loud, but it's revolutionary. Because it changes how she meets every moment, every person, every reflection. She discovers that real confidence isn't loud or boastful. It's the quiet calm of knowing she can survive heartbreak and still keep her heart open. It's the steady faith that even if others misunderstand her, she understands herself. It's the courage to take up space, not by shouting, but by standing firmly in who she is. And this confidence isn't fragile, because it isn't built on what can be taken away. It's built on truth, and truth doesn't break. When doubts return, and they always do, she meets them not with panic, but with compassion. She whispers to herself, "It's okay to feel afraid, but it's not okay to let fear decide who I become." And in choosing courage over comfort, she doesn't just change her own life, she becomes a quiet permission for others to do the same. She becomes living proof that vulnerability isn't something to be feared, but something to be honored. And perhaps this is what makes the sweetness so lasting. It isn't dependent on how others respond. It's rooted in how deeply she loves, how bravely she trusts, how fully she lives. It's a sweetness that stays even when love is lost, because it was never about them alone. It was always about her choice to open, to feel, to surrender to life itself. This way of living doesn't make pain disappear, but it transforms pain into something meaningful. Hurt no longer feels like proof she's unworthy. It becomes proof that she dared to care. Failure no longer feels like a verdict. It becomes a lesson. Loneliness no longer feels like emptiness. It becomes an invitation to come home to herself. And each return to herself deepens the sweetness, making it more unshakable, more real. She starts to see her softness not as something to fix, but as something to protect. Not with walls, but with boundaries that honor her truth. She learns to walk away from what asks her to harden, and move toward what invites her to open. And slowly, the need to be liked fades, replaced by the desire to be true, because she knows now it is better to be disliked for who she really is than loved for who she pretends to be. In the end, what remains isn't the echo of applause or the memory of how perfectly she performed. What remains is the quiet knowing that she lived bravely, loved deeply, and felt fully, that she turned fear into freedom, doubt into devotion, and vulnerability into victory. And this is the sweetness that no loss, no rejection, no passing moment can ever erase. The sweetness that comes from living her truth without apology, without disguise, and without regret. There is a power that grows quietly in those who dare to live authentically, a power not loud or aggressive, but steady and unbreakable. It is the power of self-respect, an invisible force that commands the deepest kind of admiration, not because it demands it, but because it naturally deserves it. When she chooses to honor herself, her boundaries, her desires, she sends a message far beyond words that her worth is not negotiable, that her time is precious, and that her heart is sacred. This power ripples through every part of her life, influencing not only how she loves, but how she expects to be loved in return. This self-respect becomes a beacon, lighting the way through uncertainty and doubt. It guards her against settling for less than she deserves. It teaches her to recognize when love is genuine and when it is a shadow play of need and fear. It shows her that true connection cannot thrive in compromise that costs her soul. Instead, it thrives in honesty, in mutual respect, in the shared vulnerability that comes from two people meeting as equals, unafraid to show their true selves. She learns to say no without guilt, to leave spaces where she is not valued, to walk away from those who try to diminish her light. And each time she does, she feels the rush of freedom, an exhilarating proof that her power lies not in clinging, but in letting go. She discovers that holding on too tightly only dims the sweetness she longs for, while releasing with grace makes room for something better, something real. This is not an easy path. It requires courage to stand firm when the world insists she soften. It demands strength to protect her peace when others test her boundaries. But it also offers a reward few understand until they experience it, a peace so deep it quiets the noise of insecurity, a joy so pure it outshines the pain of past wounds, and a confidence so rooted it cannot be shaken by fleeting rejection. In embracing this power, she stops seeking validation from external sources and turns inward, trusting her own voice and instincts. She learns that the sweetest approval is the one she gives herself, the gentle affirmation that she is enough exactly as she is. This internal approval becomes her foundation, making her resilient in the face of criticism and rejection. When others fail to see her worth, she no longer crumbles, she stands taller, grounded in the knowledge that her value is inherent and unchangeable. The depth of this self-respect transforms the way she loves. Love becomes a mutual exchange, a dance of giving and receiving that honors both her needs and those of the other person. It is no longer about losing herself to please, but about finding herself alongside another. This balance creates a space where passion and tenderness coexist, where strength meets softness, and where connection flourishes without sacrifice. She understands that the sweetest intimacy is built on this foundation of respect and trust. It is not rushed or forced, but allowed to grow naturally in the fertile ground of emotional safety. And this safety, she knows, begins with herself, when she respects her own feelings, listens to her desires, and refuses to settle for anything less than what nurtures her soul. This awakening redefines her entire experience of relationships. No longer does she tolerate disrespect, manipulation, or neglect disguised as love. Instead, she demands honesty, kindness, and genuine care. And when she encounters these qualities, she welcomes them with open arms, knowing she deserves nothing less. This clear sense of worthiness draws healthier relationships to her like a magnet, attracting people who reflect her newfound strength and authenticity. As this transformation deepens, she realizes that self-respect is not a destination, but a lifelong journey. It requires daily choices to honor her truth, to protect her boundaries, and to nurture her spirit. It calls for ongoing courage to confront old fears and break free from limiting beliefs that once held her captive. But with each step forward, she feels lighter, freer, more aligned with the woman she was always meant to be. And in this alignment, she discovers a profound sweetness that transcends circumstance. It is a sweetness not dependent on another's presence or approval, but born from the intimate relationship she cultivates with herself. This sweetness pulses in her veins, radiates from her eyes, and echoes in her laughter. It is the signature of a woman who has reclaimed her power, who walks with grace through life's challenges, and who loves with an open heart, fully aware of her worth. This power is not about domination or control. It is about sovereignty, being the undeniable queen of her own existence. It is about creating a life where she can show up authentically, desire boldly, and live freely. And this sovereignty is magnetic. It draws others not through force, but through the irresistible energy of someone who knows herself deeply and honors that knowing every day. To live this way is to embrace a truth often overlooked, that the most profound strength lies in vulnerability, the greatest freedom in authenticity, and the deepest love in self-respect. She embodies this truth. She does not merely exist. She shines. And that shine, born from the union of softness and strength, creates a sweetness so powerful it transforms not only her world, but the worlds of everyone she touches. In this, she finds her ultimate power, the power to choose herself again and again, without apology, without hesitation, and without fear. And that choice, more than anything else, makes life irresistibly sweet. There comes a moment when the strength born from self-respect transforms into something even greater, a deep, unshakable trust. This trust is not naive or blind. It is forged in the fires of experience, tempered by lessons learned through both triumph and pain. It is the trust that she can face uncertainty without crumbling, that she can embrace vulnerability without losing herself, and that she can navigate the complexities of love with both an open heart and a wise mind. This trust changes everything. It allows her to surrender to the flow of life without fear, to step into the unknown with steady feet, knowing that whatever happens, she will rise again. It frees her from the paralyzing grip of doubt that once held her back from expressing her desires or standing up for her boundaries. Now, she meets each challenge as a chance to prove to herself how resilient, how capable, how worthy she truly is. With trust as her foundation, she no longer needs constant reassurance from others. The approval she once sought from outside sources becomes less critical, because she has become her own source of certainty. She listens to her inner voice more than the noise of external opinions. This inner guidance is her compass, leading her toward relationships, choices, and experiences that nourish her soul rather than drain it. Trust opens the door to deeper intimacy, not only with others, but with herself. She learns to listen deeply to her feelings without judgment, to honor her needs without shame, and to communicate her truths with clarity and compassion. This honesty creates space for real connection, the kind that transcends superficial attraction and dives into the realm of authentic union. It is in this space that the sweetest forms of love and desire flourish. When trust is present, she can be fully seen and still feel safe. She can reveal her imperfections without fear of rejection, because she knows her value isn't tied to being perfect, it's tied to being real. This vulnerability becomes a source of power rather than weakness. It allows her to form bonds based on genuine understanding rather than pretense, and these bonds are far stronger and more fulfilling. The presence of trust also shifts the way she approaches challenges within relationships. Instead of reacting with fear or defensiveness, she responds with patience and openness.